You say the phrase layer blend mode to a lot of digital artists and you get some different responses, ranging from, no, I don't understand that, leave me alone, right the way through to, what? The fact of the matter is, layer blend modes are an integral part of any digital art program. In some ways, they've helped define the look of digital art since they came along rather a lot of years ago, and I think it was Photoshop who first came up with them. They are incredibly useful and incredibly so for incredible artists just like yourself. So let's take a look at them. And if you enjoy this video, I hope you'll like it, subscribe, the usual things. Also check out the links below for some discounted Procreate courses, plus the Drippy Cat Art Studio, because the video courses are top rated and there is nothing else out there quite like the Drippy Cat Art Studio. And there's also some free stuff available with that. So this file is called Foxy Blend Modes. It is available as a download, but you don't really need it. I'm not going to do anything with it apart from show you the principle behind layer blend modes. There are two layers here, and I'll make the top layer invisible for a second. Basically, you've got a picture of a fox. It could have been any picture. The reason I chose this picture is there are a range of values and some fairly natural colors. So if I make the top stuff layer visible again, I'll just move it along just a tiny bit so you can see all of the things on this layer. You have, from right to left, a white circle, a black circle, and a dead mid grey circle, and that will become significant later on. You have two gradients going from black to white and from white to black, and then you have a number of different color gradients. They are just to show you the effect that layer blend modes have on whatever they are sitting on top of. Now come to where I'm circling that little N and tap on it. You have your opacity slider at the top, but also you have all of these names like shade, linear burn, screen, and it all looks very scary and very confusing. But let me show you something. This layer is set to normal blend mode. I'm going to rest my finger anywhere inside this box with all those letters on, like shade, screen, linear burn, whatever, and I'm going to drag down to move upwards like this, and I'll set it to multiply. Oh, look at that. The look of this top stuff layer has changed. Instead of just sitting on top of whatever is underneath, it is interacting with whatever is underneath. And you can see for the most part, things have got darker. That is what the multiply layer blend mode does. It makes everything underneath it darker, but in a way that you can use. So let's give you 5 things you'll want to know about layer blend modes. Number 1, each and every layer you create is always in one of the layer blend modes. Now by default, that is normal. Whenever you create a new layer, it will come in as normal. Number 2, they usually work by changing the look of the layer that's below them, but they don't permanently alter the layer below them. Let's get a little bit sciencey. The way they work is by using the luminance or the brightness values of the layers. This layer we're on plus whatever layers are below. And for every single pixel that you can see on your screen, they convert all that color into a luminance value or a brightness value. And that value is going to be somewhere between 0, which is black, and 1, which is white, but it is a floating point number, so you get lots of decimal places, so it's very accurate. And then all that happens is Procreate or whatever art program looks at that value on this layer and looks at the value of whatever is underneath it. That can be lots of different layers. And it does a floating point math with those two different values. And that's how you come up with a kaleidoscope of effects. That's as far as I want to go with the science. But look, take a look here. Multiply, well, that's a mathematical operation. It's multiplying the values of the top layer with the values underneath. And that is all the mathematical stuff I want to do. I just want you to have a greater understanding. Rule number 3, layer blend modes can be changed at any time to a different layer blend mode. Nothing is fixed in stone, and you've seen me do this. Look, multiply, darken, shade, let's come here, let's come to add, light color, overlay, soft light, hard light. Let's bring it back to overlay for a second, which is looking rather nice. But also, rule number 4, any new layer you create comes in as normal blend mode, but it also comes in at 100% opacity. And you can see the slider up here. And if you think you are spoiled for choice already, you can alter the opacity of this layer from max or 100% right the way down to, well, none. And you can gradually dial in the strength of the effect you want. So all these options are now multiplied by 100. And point number 5, they are divided into logical groups. That is important because you look at something like this with all of these different blend modes, you get completely overwhelmed. You'll never understand what does what. Well, actually, it's really not that hard. And when you're doing digital art, you tend to use just a few of these blend modes again and again and again, and some you will probably never use. Let's start off with the first group, and it's so simple. Just think everything gets darker underneath. Multiply, things got darker. Darken, yeah, tell you what I'll do, a backup. Let's remind you, this is normal. That's our default layer blend mode, and the colors and the shades just sit on top of whatever is below. And in Procreate, every blend mode that sits above normal in the list makes things darker, but in different ways. Darker color, linear burn, color burn, they're all making things darker. Let's tell you the useful ones. Multiply is very useful. You can use this to create shading in your paintings in a very natural looking way. You compare that with something like color burn. Oh, look at that. All of a sudden the colors are getting darker, but there's a lot of color there. Color burn is good if you're doing more cartoon style illustrations where you want vibrant shadows. But these all do the same thing. They make everything darker. Multiply, good for natural. Darken, tend not to use too much. Shade is an interesting one. In fact, look, it looks very, very similar to Darken. This is a pretty new one to Procreate, and I did some reading up about it, and to use my interpretation of it, it looks like it's supposed to do something similar to Multiply, and that is create natural-looking shaded areas, none too bright, as you can see, but it's supposed to be a more subtle version of Multiply. I am not sure about this one. What I would prefer to do is use Multiply and use slightly less darker colors to paint with, or, and this is a top tip, if you're using layer blend modes, set your opacity to somewhere below 100%. Often I used to say, well, set it to 50%. And that way, you're doing your painting, and if you decide you need less of it, you go below 50%. If you decide you need something more intense, you go above 50%. I spent years saying that, then I actually had a little word with myself. And nowadays, I would recommend, if you're painting using a layer blend mode, especially one of the darker ones or the lighter ones or the contrasty ones, try and set your opacity somewhere between 70% and 80%. Because what naturally happens when you're painting to a certain depth. And more often, you look and you decide you want to decrease the value a little bit. And sometimes, yes, you want to increase the effect, but usually it's not by that much, because if you have it set to about 50% by default, by the time you get to more than 20% above what you originally intended, things have got too intense. So I recommend between 70 and 80% as your default value, and then if you need something a little bit more intense, just nudge it up. If you need something less intense, move it down. So, darken, yeah, shade, yeah, color burn. Things get intense very quickly, but things get very vibrant very quickly. So this is quite good for more stylized illustrations where you want some vibrant colors. Linear burn does something similar to color burn, but less intense. That can also be useful. Darker color, well, Procreate looks at the top layer and looks at everything underneath, and it decides which of the 2 pixels it's comparing is darker, and then it shows you the darker pixels. That's why if you look around, say, the nose of the fox, in some bits that blue is a darker value and so you see it, in some bits that blue is a lighter value and so it becomes invisible. That's interesting, but I don't know how much I would use it if I was painting. Now, one thing, if I set this to normal, look at that white circle. It's completely visible, but if I move to one of the darker blend modes like Multiply, it becomes completely invisible. So when you're using the darken blend modes, the lighter the color, the less visible it becomes. Look at those 2 black to white gradients in the middle of your screen. The lighter the pixels, the less visible they are. All right, those are the darken blend modes. They all do variations of the same thing. Now let's look at the lighten blend modes, which all do variations of the same thing. They make things lighter, like this. Let's go through them. Lighten, yeah, can be quite useful. Screen. If you want some natural highlight in your painting, screen is a good one. It'll give you your lighter tones, but it won't get too intense or creative with the colors you're using. Compare that with color dodge. Oh, look at that. Those lighter tones are getting much more saturated. And you've got to be careful with. It's a very powerful one, and it makes things very bright very quickly. And lighter color, well, that works the same way as darker color. The brightness of the top layer gets compared with the brightness of everything below it, which can be multiple layers, and whichever one of those two pixels is brighter, that's the pixel that gets shown. Let's take this back to screen. If you remember, with the dark and blend modes, white became completely invisible. But with the lighter blend modes, it's the opposite way around. Let's take a look at that black. Let's go to normal. Those blacks go completely invisible when you set it to something like screen or color dodge. And take a look at the two gradients in the middle. They go white to black or black to white. And the white completely covers up whatever is underneath it. And the black is completely invisible, and you get this sliding scale where the lighter something is, the more it stands out with what is underneath it. Now let's face it, we're looking at the fox, so we're looking at these black to white layers. Tell you what, if I come to my transform tool, just a second, and I'm going to move these color strips over the fox, then I'll come back and set it to, say, screen again. And then when you look at that, hopefully there's a light bulb coming over your head right now. Because look, set it back to normal. Those colors aren't particularly bright, and you could paint with any of those colors. But when you set it to something like screen, which is a light and blend mode, all of a sudden you're getting some very colorful lighter areas, but you're getting different tints of colorful light areas. Let's just zoom in on, just say, these three here. I'll set that back to normal. Those are the colors we're looking at, not particularly bright, but one is orange, one is green, and there's a bit of blue on the side. Set it to screen, you're getting a lighter tint of orange or a lighter tint of green and a bit of blue on the side. But look at that orange and look at that green. They are tinting the highlighted areas in either a warm color or a cool color. And if I make my slider down to 0 and then gradually fade it in, can you see how easy it's going to be to paint on this layer either a warm color or a cool color to get warmer or lighter highlights? And here's the thing. All that detail in the fur around the fox's ear, that detail is staying there. I haven't overwritten anything. So whatever time I spent creating that fur effect, I'm not going to lose it. Instead, I can augment it. I can add to it. So you can paint your lighter areas, but you can keep your detail. And a very good way to build up very complicated lighter areas and darker areas, and used properly, it makes your life so much easier as an artist. All right, let's pinch to zoom in. Let's move it across a little bit. I'll tap undo a few times to take that top layer back to where it originally was. And now overlay. This is part of the contrast layer blend modes. They're called by other things, but I call them contrast layer blend modes because all they do is make the lights lighter and the darks darker. So basically it's the lighten and darken blend modes all on one layer. The way it works is if I come back to my normal layer, look at that mid-gray circle. That is bang on mid-gray. And if I come back to any of the contrast blend modes, let's come back to overlay, the mid-gray becomes completely invisible. That is your everything disappears value. And the lighter the top layer gets, the lighter the layer underneath gets. And the darker this layer set to overlay gets, the darker everything is underneath. And there's plenty of them: soft light, hard light, vivid light, linear light, pin light, hard mix. So which are the useful ones? Well, for natural darker tones, it's multiply. For natural lighter tones, it's screen. For natural darker and lighter tones, it's either going to be overlay or soft light. I mean, look at that. I could easily use those dark to light values to create some very natural looking shadows. Overlay is the same, but more intense. Once you start getting down to things like hard light, vivid light, which is kind of a mixture of color dodge and color burn, and the linear light, which again has possibilities, but it's quite intense. Pin light and hard mix start doing some rather strange things. But for this, by and large, now maybe occasionally I'd use hard light, but it tends to be soft light or overlay. Incidentally, all of the papers or canvases I supply with the Drippy Cat Art Studio come with a layer on top which is set to overlay blend mode. The actual layers themselves are all mid-grey with darker bits and lighter bits. and they're all set to overlay. That way you get a more realistic paper surface or a canvas surface, because you get the shadows on the paper or the canvas, but you also get some highlights on the paper and canvas, and they are all set to around about somewhere between 70 and 80%, so you can make the effect less intense or more intense as you see fit. So hard mix, okay, not for drawing. Then you get things like difference, exclusion, and subtract, and divide. I think I can say in my career as a designer and illustrator, and using Photoshop since version 1, I have never used any of this, unless I'm going for a particular effect. Like if somebody wanted me to do a slightly psychedelic or surreal effect, I might use those. But for day-to-day painting, no, you're never going to use them. And you remember me saying that this is all mathematics? There's some mathematical expressions. Divide, subtract, difference, exclusion, yeah. And we are nearly there. We are just left with 4 more. Hue, saturation, colour, and luminosity. Let's start off with luminosity and explain what is going on. If I come to my colours palette, let's choose a colour at random. Let's try that beige colour. If you are in the colour panel and you come to the value, which I'm circling now, you can see that every colour has 3 components. And you can see the sliders at the top. You have hue. That's one component. That is the colour of the rainbow that we're dealing with. Then you have saturation. That's how intense that colour of the rainbow is. If I move it around, you can see in the very top right, that colour is getting either completely grey or really quite intense. And then you get how bright it is. So it can be almost, well, it can be black, it can be white, it can be very bright, or it can be somewhere in between. The hue, the saturation, and the brightness are just 3 different components that go to make up whatever color you're looking at on your screen. And every pixel and every color on your screen can be described that way. You might see them labeled HSV sometimes. The V just stands for value, but it means brightness. So let's go back to our layer blend modes. These 4 blend modes are all known as the component layer blend modes. Okay, so let's take a look at luminosity. It's taking the brightness of the pixels which are on top and combining them with the hue and the saturation of whatever is underneath. And hopefully you can see that. You can see the oranges or the browns of the fur. That's the basic colors of the rainbow and how saturated they are, but it's giving it the value of the top layer. If you look at those 8 little gradients to the right, they have a variety of different colors when they're in normal blend mode, but in luminosity, no. All the colors go. The only thing they're giving to this picture as a whole is how bright or dark they are. Once you realize that, the rest is pretty straightforward. The color, you're getting the hue and the saturation of the layer on top and combining it with the dark to light values of whatever is underneath. This is what people have been using for decades to colorize old black and white photos. Saturation is the saturation of the top layer combined with the hue and the dark to light values of whatever is underneath. And you can see that those gradients that we have in the middle of the picture, plus the white, grey and black dots, they're all doing the same thing. If the top layer is desaturated, then everything underneath it appears desaturated. Hue gives you the hues of the top layer and it combines it with the luminance and saturation from whatever is underneath. Occasionally I've tried painting with my layer blend mode set to hue. I find it a little bit unpredictable. What I would tend to use from these would be color. Yes, I would definitely use color because it's extremely good at giving you tints in the highlighted areas without adjusting the brightness values. Same for the shadow areas. Look, let's make this invisible. Let's create a new layer. Let's set it to color. I will lower down the opacity. Let's make the layer in between invisible. And I'm going to choose a very cool color. Let's try, well, I have a palette here which comes with the Drippy Cat Art Studio called Tints. And these tint palettes, 1 and 2, they are specifically designed to work with this layer blend mode. I've chosen kind of a cyan-y type color there. Let's choose a slightly more bluey color because I've already got some slight cyan effects there. I will come to any brush I want. Let's come to the classic library. I will come to airbrushing. I've got soft blend selected. I'll make my opacity fairly low. My brush size is about the right size to give you a broad area. And maybe I should build this up a bit quickly, but ooh, look at this. My shadows, or how deep the shadows are, haven't really been affected by this, but I'm altering the color tint of this area. If I make this layer invisible for a second, what it was before, what it is now. How useful is that? And of course I can come to my eraser. I'll choose any eraser, back it up to 100%, and I can erase this from the areas I don't want. Okay, that is it. That is layer blend mode. A whole world of different effects just waiting for you to have fun with. They're really not that hard. Make things lighter, make things darker, make things more contrasty, or you can add color tints. That is it. Hopefully I'll speak to you soon.